Joining us to talk more about this from New York City is Byron Garrett, chairman of the National Family Engagement Alliance, and also, as we showed a picture, the author of the book, The ABCs of Life. And I'm sure we could spend an hour on this, but unfortunately we don't have that much time. But so I might start by asking you is, in that package, we talked about the online education, what a big deal it is. It's going to increase probably fourfold in the next coming of years. How do those numbers compare to the United States? I mean, online education is big everywhere around the world.
It is. I think you see that there's a drastic and continuous sustained increase of online education as you look at folks looking to go back and retool, gain additional skill sets to make them employable and to improve their station in life. In the U.S., you've seen companies do incredibly well, and now you see the same thing happening across the globe. There
used to be this stigmatism to doing things online. It wasn't quite as cool as going to an actual classroom, or it wasn't the same as sitting in a room full of 100 kids having their hands raised up. This stigmatism is obviously, it's come down a lot. Walk us through, how did this all change in just the last few years alone?
Well, I think what you see is that part of that stigmatism was correct at the outset, the way programs were initially structured. But you see organizations like the Apollo Group, University of Phoenix, Argosy, and Capella, institutions like that have really spent a significant amount of time saying, how do we re-strategize and rebrand and package our curriculum to ensure that it has the same level of rigor and relevancy as a traditional four-year institution? And you also see where they've partnered with corporations saying, what are the specific needs that you have for your employee base, and let us attempt to design a program and being more flexible to meet the needs both of the student schedule, but also of the employers that are looking for qualified individuals to go to work.
One of the criticisms of online education is you don't get this interaction with the classroom or the teacher. You can't raise your hand, you can't interrupt the teacher, you can't get yelled at. Is that still an important part of the education process, that personal network that you have in that physical space?
I think the personal network is critical to success in business. I would not limit that or confine that just to the education discussion. With that said, what you find in this day and age, corporations that are looking for employees to be able to work virtually and remote, the whole notion of how do you work in team dynamics and group dynamics is shifting in many cases to a social platform. So what you see now are these institutions saying, how do we also provide an environment that meets the need of the student, but also prepares them in many cases for what the real world looks like? And you'll continue to see companies allow individuals to work remote in any location around the world, regardless of where the home office is. And now you can do the same thing from an education perspective. I think the challenge becomes for that institution to ensure that they have the same level of rigor and connectivity so that that employee doesn't lose sight, or that student doesn't lose sight of those human relation skills that are still needed in this day and age.
Are there limits to what you can do online? I mean, let's say, for example, you were learning to be a dentist or a doctor. I mean, obviously there are experiments you have to do, and there's things that you have to do. But if you're learning how to be a writer, for example, obviously being online is okay. What are the limits to this?
Well, I think those two examples that you pointed out, when you look at being a doctor or someone that's in a healthcare profession or a specific indication or industry that requires that level of technical, practical application of the skill set, you still see corporations and organizations looking to offer those practical journeys so that students can do a practicum, they can get real insight, on-the-job training, if you will, that aligns with the academic curriculum. That's not necessarily new, but I think what you see in this day and age is that organizations are saying, how do we ensure that a student who's enrolled in our program that is traveling globally, no matter where they are in the world, how do we ensure that they have the skill set to also be effective? How do you match the academic content with the practical work experience that you need in the environment? And so the notion of, say, a healthcare profession, I think you're not going to see residencies by any stretch go away. Everyone wants to know that if you have an MD, that you are still spending time in the surgery room and doing your clinical labs to ensure that you know what you're doing.
Byron, I'm gonna put you in a time machine. You and I are gonna go back a couple decades, and we're gonna make ourselves 18 again. In your book, The ABCs of Life, you talk about engagement and education. So if you and I were looking at going to school, and I wanted to be an anchor and you wanted to be an author, what school would we go to, and how would we do it?
You know, we would have gone through a traditional program. You would have said, I'm going to enroll in a journalism program. It's going to take me 4 years. I'll do a couple internships during the summer, maybe working in the radio station on campus, possibly lucking up getting an internship at a TV studio. And so when you look at it from that perspective, I think the tenets of that still hold true. folks are still looking for practical skill set to apply to the academic knowledge. So years ago, the opportunities were not as vast. But in this day and age, individuals can create companies overnight. They can join organizations and become directly involved. There are a whole host of career technical student organizations that give practical skill set. So I think as society has shifted,
we're out of time.
Marketplace has.
Byron, I'm still going to be a bad student, author. Thank you very much for your time on online education. Let's get straight to Asia and checking on the markets there with